This was an article. Uh, it's an older one if you see, but PC Gamer retweeted it. Boss fights, good or bad, and I thought it was interesting, and I kind of sparked some thoughts in me, and I wanted to share those with you. Ooh, I even have like a little video. I don't really care about IGN's take on it, uh, but some people say it's good, some people say they're bad, mostly bad, bad with a few exceptions, real bad. So some people really don't like boss fights. There is some ways that boss fights can go bad, but me personally, I've always liked boss fights. I always think they're fun. Hey, Ryan Stone Supremacist with a cool unicorn for like a $9.99. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I don't know how that's related to Ryan or not, but appreciate the support. I got a video, my boss medley video. I just threw a bunch of bosses together so I can talk about, to give me some sort of visual to talk about while I share my thoughts. So my thoughts on bosses is that, and this has been it for a while, but there's really like two ways you can go with boss fights. And the first is you make it cinematic. You just have it's a cinematic, like fun way to cap off a game. And this fight that I'm showing on screen right now, the Ice Worm, was definitely like a super cinematic fight where it's just fun. Rusty shoots it out of the from across the arena, and it looks really cool. And in a lot of ways, Nintendo does this pretty well too, where they have these really cinematic fights. They're not like super challenging. They're not going to really like test the limits of how well you understand the mechanics or how well you can execute these whatever controls or like combat mechanics that are in the game. It's just it's fun. It's like a fun way to kind of cap off the chapter, and I think it really fits narratively, not just narratively like in the game itself, but sort of like a cultural narrative, like the old time stories where you go into the cave. The hero goes into a cave or a dungeon or hell or whatever, and he has to like fight some sort of like dragon or monster, or overcome some sort of darkness in order to emerge victorious, emerge transformed. The hero's journey type of story, kind of crap. So I mean, you gotta have like a boss in there. It just feels right to have it. Without it, it just feel empty. And sure, yeah, a lot of this is kind of different from the normal Zelda mechanics of exploring the sort of dungeons and solving puzzles, but I like it. It's fun, and the sort of way like these characters that you kind of go back and forth. It's not super intense, but it kind of fits this sort of honesty of the Zelda series, where it's like you dodge the enemy attack, and then you get your chance to attack, and then you sort of repeat it 3 to 6 times as the the boss patterns get more and more intense, and you emerge triumphant. It works. It works. It's not, again, it's not the most intense fight there is. It's not the most skill intensive, but it's good. It works. The other way to take it beyond the cinematic is to, again, make him super like skill intensive, to really test your limits, test like your patience and how well you understand the game mechanics. Really like potentially frustrate the player, but they'll overcome it and they'll emerge with like a greater appreciation for the game itself. Armored Core is pretty good at doing this. They made some really challenging bosses, like on screen, and this is the final boss of the true ending. But this is a really challenging fight, and it does a ton of damage. And again, I had to fight this guy maybe I don't know 20 plus times before I was able to kill him. It's a really tough fight, but once you get it down, you can beat him pretty consistently. So it's not like he's taking cheap shots. You don't feel robbed necessarily by. I mean, sometimes you do, but it's a FromSoft game. Sometimes the hitboxes on this stuff is just kind of BS. But this is it fits FromSoft. It's a game where the bosses are brutal. It's a dark, gritty world where it's kill or be killed. I like it. It fits that game, and it's sort of like the tone of the game. So that's the other way you can take it, or you can like do both. Like I think From Software does a good job, especially with some of their bosses like Ibis, where it's both cinematically beautiful, as like a really really cool looking visual fight, but it's also extremely challenging. In addition to that, so that is one thing. But they're all like bad things about boss fights, and one of the main things is like invincibility. I think is one mechanic that is really lame in boss fights, and like with like Ice Worm, majority of the time the Ice Worm is actually invincible, and you just have to sort of wait for your opening to actually do damage, and which is it's a really like I said it's a really cool looking fight the first time you do it, but if you're going for like an S rank and you have to like fight it multiple times, it is such a pain in the ass to wait for your chance to actually do damage. There's no way to make it go faster. There's no way to like improve the shorten the window of the time you have to wait. And once you like learn the pattern of his attacks, you're just sort of like sitting there, bored out of your mind, waiting for the opportunity to get it done. There's also games like Zenless Zone Zero that have invincibility. Some of the bosses' attacks have invincibility, but they also one of their main objectives is to beat it as quickly as possible. So when you throw in invincibility to those things, it becomes incredibly frustrating as you just you see the timer going down and you can't do any damage to this person, even though you know its attack pattern, you know what openings you have, but you just have to wait. It's terrible. There's also RPGs are really notorious for this, but they sort of take away like different when you're fighting bosses. A lot of the mechanics like status effects or certain strategies just don't work on bosses, which I kind of think one of the cool things about one of like the really great tests of mechanics, a game's combat mechanics is that do you have to take away certain things for in order to make some certain mechanics and statuses in order to make your game a challenge. And if you can still make your game a challenge while allowing the players all their options, I think that's a good way to tell like the combat system's very well made. I don't like the fact that I can understand some immunities. It could potentially fit aesthetically. That some characters are immune to certain status effects, but overall, I don't like it when they do that. Like they kind of take away some of your techniques. Like, oh, this strategy just will not work because he's apparently immune to this. But like I said, there's a few things in boss fights I don't like, but overall, I think boss fights are pretty good. It could be a mixed bag. There's also one of my other big things, and some people will not agree that this is probably won't agree, but I don't like when like the last boss kind of throws away all of the game mechanics before it. Like Tears of the Kingdom, the final fight, you're not really using a lot of your weapons and skills. You're kind of fighting in the air. Sonic in 3D, all of the final fights are him and Super Sonic. That's like the best. Like it's become like a standard to have like a Super Sonic fight at the end of it. I do not like it because you're immune to damage at that point, and it totally changes. Again, it's one of those things where it's cinematic, but when you just take away all your mechanics and you don't make the last boss fight the sort of like ultimate test of how well you can play the game, that kind of annoys me. I'm not a huge fan of that, but it does look good. Like the last fight of Tears of the Kingdom was like pretty cool, and it does set up that really cool ending sequence. So I can't fault them for that, but overall, boss fights, pretty good in my opinion. pretty good, but they can be tricky sometimes. I don't remember the bad boss fights as much as I remember the good boss fights. Yeah, pretty much anything in Hollow Knight had some really cool boss fights. I did enjoy it. They're tough, but there's a lot of ways to kind of overcome them, and you could do some like interesting stuff with like your. I forget what those like artifacts were called. The accessories you use to kind of change how much damage you do. There was like some cool like risk versus reward strategies. If I remember correctly, and it's so yeah, boss fights overall pretty good, pretty good. And then also like shmups here, boss fights are really important. They're like kind of like the challenging part of it. The game that's on screen right now, Toho, is known for this. The bullet patterns and the different spells. They're all about kind of boss fights in a way. All the chapters end with like super cool looking boss fight where you have these like beautiful patterns. And this is sort of a remake of the original game that really even improves the graphics. So you couldn't have like shmups. I think lend themselves to boss fights really well, and they become a very very cool way to sort of test people's skill. Definitely a great challenge. But that in a way, like the game's mechanics are so simple. You don't have to like change what the game is to make a boss fight. You just have to make it more intense in a lot of ways.